So every golfer that I've ever come across has told me one thing: Ryan, I want to be more consistent. So what separates the tour player from you, the recreational golfer, from achieving that consistent game that you've always dreamt of having? Well, I believe that I have the secrets that aren't often spoken about. And once you know these secrets, you're going to be taking money off your mates in every single round that you play. And in this video, I'm going to share the 2 secrets that I'm talking about. And once you learn these secrets, especially the second secret, it is going to be the biggest aha moment you've ever had in your life. So let's get stuck in. So the first secret in becoming consistent is we need to understand our dispersion pattern. Now, what is a dispersion pattern? Well, a dispersion pattern is basically how far left and how far right you hit the golf ball. Now, the best players in the world all have a dispersion pattern. Let's take someone like Rory McIlroy, who we would all consider as a magnificent driver of the golf ball. Now, if I was to draw you a fairway, let's say that this is a fairway, and let's say that that fairway is 100 yards wide. So we have our furthest wide point is 50 either side. So here is our 0. We have 50 yards either side of this fairway. Now, Rory McIlroy, one of the best golfers in the world, one of the best drivers in the world, Rory has a dispersion pattern of about 60 yards. So think about that. His furthest left ball actually goes 30 yards left and 30 yards right, as an example. So everyone thinks Rory hits these high bombs, these high draws, but in reality, Rory hits the occasional ball 30 yards left, and he also hits that occasional ball 30 yards right. So basically, even someone like Rory McIlroy has a dispersion pattern that looks a little bit like that. So he misses it on the right and the left, 30 yards left, 30 yards right, giving him a total of 60 yards left to right. So let's use this example. I've drawn a made up fairway with some tee blocks, my nice bunkers, and my out of bounds, which is the red crosses. Now, again, think about a Rory McIlroy, 60-yard dispersion. So Rory tees it up right here, and he hits 10 golf balls. Now, one golf ball might end up here, one golf ball might end up here. He might hit his 30-yard right ball, he might hit his 30-yard left ball, or let's even call them 20 yards. And occasionally, he will hit one in this out of bounds area. Occasionally, he might hit a left ball out of bounds as well. So when we talk about being consistent, what does consistency really mean? So what I want you to do in order to be more consistent is figure out your dispersion pattern. Maybe it's 100 yards, maybe it's 120 yards. And you know what? That is perfectly okay. Think about the best driver we have on the planet right now. If his dispersion pattern is 60 yards, even a scratch golfer at 80 or 85 or 90 yards is doing a really good job. So what would you be if you're off a 5, a 10, a 20, a 30 handicap? It's okay to have a dispersion pattern that is quite large. The key is to factor it in when we play. Which brings me to my next point, approaching greens with a dispersion pattern in mind. I've drawn a green here with a couple of different flags. Now, let's assume that we have a dispersion pattern that looks a little like this. So you can see there that my dispersion pattern is more favored to the right-hand side as opposed to the left-hand side. Now, where would that be good to use? Well, maybe on a left flag. It's a perfect example to use because I could almost guarantee if I aimed at that left flag, if most of my shots end up to the right, I could aim at that flag and still end up more so to the right. Where would it not really work? Well, it won't work too well if we're going for a right flag, because if we've got a right flag and let's say all of this is water, let's say all of that is water, well, if we aim for that flag and our right dispersion comes into play, we are going to hit some golf balls in the water. whereas the left ball, we're not going to hit it in the water. So what should we do? Well, in my opinion, what we should do is we should move our target more left. So if you're someone who always hits it out to the right, let's say we're going for this flag, it's front right, and there's water all the way on this right-hand side. Well, the first thing we'd want to do is instead of aiming for this flag here, we would want to aim more in the center of the green. Now, here's what will happen. If we put that same dispersion pattern over this marker here, we're still going to end up with some golf balls left of the target, so left of this flag, which means that yes, we will have a longer putt, but we will accidentally hit some golf balls quite close to the hole. That's part of our dispersion pattern. However, if we aim at the flag, remember, we might have some just hit the green, but we're also going to hit some in the water. Now, if we aim at this marker, we're never ever going to hit it in the water. Sure, we're going to hit a couple that are a little bit further away from the hole, but the number one thing here, we want to eliminate penalty shots. So what we want to do, move our target to the left in this case, so that we're factoring in our dispersion patterns. Now you might be wondering, Ryan, how do I improve my dispersion pattern? Well, the obvious answer here is get coaching. Improve your technique, hit the ball better, get more control of that club face, club path, and you'll be able to narrow your dispersion pattern. So if your dispersion pattern currently is 100 yards from left to right, all we want to do is narrow it down to 90 yards. We do that through good coaching, good technique, and just hitting better golf shots. So secret number 2, how do we become more consistent? Well, the first thing we need to understand is something called a bell curve. Now, if you haven't seen a bell curve before, it looks a little something like this. So that's exactly what a bell curve looks like. Now, what does it mean? Well, the first thing we need to do is we need to put some numbers on this bottom section. But what numbers are we going to put? We're going to put the best and worst score a tour player is going to have throughout the year. So let's say 60 is their best round and 80 is their worst round. We're also going to put in, let's say, their average round of 70. So we're going to have 62, 64, 66, 78, and 80. That is basically a tour pro year in, year out. They shoot around about 70 most of the time, but they also have a shocker and shoot 80, and they also have an absolute blinder, shoot the lights out and shoot 60. Now, if we have a closer look at this bell curve, we can see that most of the scores that a tour pro is going to shoot is going to fall in that 66 to maybe 72, 73 category. So we can see here that this is where the majority of their scores happen. Now remember, a tour pro is playing on TV, playing for their life, and they typically play between +5 and +8. So if you think about it, let's say 70 or 72 with scratch rating, we would have that tour pro, let's say they're a +5, they shoot 67, which kind of falls right into our really good bell curve area. And as you know, even off +5, that player could have not so good of a round. They might shoot even par, they might shoot 1 over, 2 over, and that's why you're going to see the bell curve end down this area, which for them is about a 72. And occasionally they have that absolute shocker round where maybe it's windy, it's raining, and they shoot somewhere down here, 77, 78, maybe 80. We've seen that from time to time. And then obviously they have an absolute day out on the links, and they go and shoot that 60, sometimes even 59. But you'll often see a really good score for a tour player somewhere around that 64 to 62 range. Now, the thing about that is they don't shoot it that often, nor do they shoot down in the 80s that often. And that's why you're going to see this bell curve really have most of the scoring around about that 66 to maybe 72 to 73 area. Now remember, you want to be more consistent. So how do we become more consistent if the best players that have ever played the game shoot between 80 and 60 throughout the year? So let's look at this a different way. What would your numbers be? Think about your handicap. Let's use a 6 marker as an example. So on a par 72 golf course, that 6 marker is shooting something around 78. Now, 10 worse than 78 would be an 88, which I'm sure any 6 markers watching this, you have shot, and their best is say a 68. So all of a sudden we've got 10 worse and 10 best, essentially. And then again, we're gonna work out our middle numbers. So we're gonna go 70, 72, 84, and 86. So we're going to see that even a 6 handicap player, which is a pretty good player, they are still going to average around about that 74 to 82 range, which is quite typical for a 6 marker. Think about playing a Stableford event. If you don't have a very good day out, maybe it's 30, 32 points, well, again, that ends up on this back end of the bell curve. And if you have a really good day, maybe it's 40 points, 42 points, we end up down here. So the question remains, does consistency actually exist? Here's my thoughts. All we're trying to do is reduce these numbers. So if we take out that 88 and maybe we produce an 84, we've just dropped 4 shots, because then it makes this number here possibly a 64, which then makes our middle number around about a 74. So obviously we would just be better the better we played, and we would be less bad the worse we played. That's how we gain consistency, because even the best players in the world, sometimes they shoot 80, sometimes they shoot 60. There's absolutely no way around that. So as I say to all my students, instead of wanting to be more consistent, how about you try this instead? All we should be doing is striving to hit less bad shots and more good shots. And that's essentially how you're going to become more consistent. Now, another thing that irks golfers like you wouldn't believe is playing a great front nine and a poor back nine, or the opposite. Now, if you're wondering why that's happening, check out the video I've got on the screen right now. It's going to solve all the problems and provide you the answers that you're looking for.